So we've got a few of us already. Let me figure out how many. Got 19 people. Okay, so we'll start off because we want to do 20 people doing the icebreaker, because any more than that it gets a little bit much. And then I'll go through what we're going to do, which I've forgotten to put on the mural. My apologies, but it's very, very focused today, talking about how we remove bus stops. And then so we'll do the icebreaker. I'll quickly read through an agenda. We'll talk about the quick outcomes from the last couple of meetings so that we're all aligned. And then we'll go on and we'll tackle archiving and deleting a stop. And then we've got a last little bit on some of the other stop statuses. I just want to understand who's using them, who's not, if they're of interest to you, if they're not, and if you're not using it, why you might not be using it. So just trying to get a little bit of a dig in there. And then we'll do the usual feedback session at the end. So the icebreaker. Hopefully everyone can see the mural screen. Is there anyone who's got problems accessing the mural today? And let me just quickly grab the URL for it, because I've got a little bit.ly URL, but I'll just put the big long one in because that's just so much easier right now. I'll just put it into the chat so that you can all go see it. It's actually easy when I do the recordings if I don't share my screen, because then I can see who's talking and it makes it a lot more interesting than it's just me for 2 and a bit hours. Although Robin has probably watched 2 and a bit hours of just me talking at a screen. So we're going to do the icebreaker, which is your name, your pronoun, where are you from, which company, which local authority, and the question for today, based on the Potters bus station fire, is electric buses. Are they ready for now or not quite yet? That's the question for today. So doing the icebreaker, I'm Dr. J. I use they as a pronoun. I'm a consultant from ThoughtWorks. I'm working for the Department for Transport. And electric buses, ready for now, not quite yet. I'm kind of almost in the not quite yet. I think electrification of public transport is the way to go. We might just want to look at the battery technologies and things like that and get that a little bit smoother and faster. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my list of people and I'm going to send it to Andy Hole. I'm going to make you first up.
Hi, I'm Andy Hole. I'm a he. I am from National Public Transport Information, and I don't think electric buses are ready, just yet, but not long, I don't think.
Thank you for that. And then Lorna Cunningham, you're the next one up.
Hey guys, I'm Lorna. I am a public transport officer with West Lothian Council, so interested to see what we can get out of today's session.
Fantastic. Lorna, by the way, do you happen to know who does your job in Midlothian, and could you put us in contact? Because we are desperately hunting Midlothian, which will become almost a meme, because we are trying to find the you in Midlothian.
I thought it was Ricky Dunbar, was it not?
You don't need to answer now. We'll just. Oh, I love the fact that Gordon is shaking their head. Gordon, you're going to be the next one up, so I'm going to throw it to you. And and the second question for you is who's doing this at Midlothian?
Hi, Gordon Smith, Scottish Borders Council Public Transport Officer. Electric buses, if they came in tomorrow, our planet and the Borders couldn't deal with them. We have no power structure and we have no bus structure. So privately, I'm hoping we're going hydrogen or something like that is feasible. We've got a low population and long spread between places. Midlothian's a neighbouring authority for us. It's a mystery who's running the show. The transport manager retired, and Ricky was promoted into a better world years ago and swore he wouldn't take on NaPTAN. So I think if you go to him with the very stuff that we're talking about, I suspect he'll slam the phone down on you, but that's an opinion. So I'm really, really sorry. I'm really, really sorry I can't name They don't answer. And if you look at the NaPTAN register, it's not been updated since 2018 for Midlothian.
Gordon, that's brilliant. And I haven't quite had the email slammed down, but the phone slammed down, but I have had the emails that just don't get responded to after about 6 chases. My second question to you is, I didn't catch your pronoun. Do you use he, she, or they?
He, thank you.
He. No problems. Right, next person. Let's go for Dan Saunders. You're up.
Hello, yeah, I'm Dan Saunders. I'm a he, him. I am from Basemap. And electric buses, I think they work great in urban environments. I think there's lots of electric buses around where we are. There's lots of electric buses in London, but maybe not so much for the rural. But I think we're getting there and getting closer as every day goes past.
Thank you very much. Darcy, you're next up.
Hi. Yes, I'm Darcy Harmer Manning. I'm from Passenger Technology Group. I'm a he. And I'm product manager for our network services. Electric buses is a good one. I don't know the answer to that one. I hope so. I do hope so. But I guess there are awesome number of challenges to overcome before they're mainstream, I suppose.
Fabulous. Thank you for that. Deborah Glaves, you're the next one up.
Hi, I'm Deborah Glaves. I'm from Travel in Cymru. I am the data controller, and I'm a she.
And your thoughts on electric buses?
I haven't got any thoughts, to be honest. We're lucky to have buses at all, never mind electric.
Thank you for that. Next one up is Robin.
Hello, my name is Robin Greenslade. I'm a he. It's the first meeting I've been in, but I will warn you, I have watched many of the videos. It took a while, but I have tried to catch up. In relation to electric buses, Rhondda and Taff, where I work, haven't got any. But living in Newport Transport have gone crazy on this, and there's every time I look around, there's an electric bus. So I'm interested to see just how good they are and how long they last. So it is something that they've invested in, and it's become a big thing in this area. So I'm interested to see what's going on, and hopefully it'll go well.
Fantastic!
They've just introduced it recently, and it seems to be taking off very well.
Fabulous. Let's all keep an eye on Newport. So the next person up would be Mark Hodgkiss.
Yeah, Mark Hodgkiss, scheduled bus officer with Cumbria County Council. I'm a he. I'm going with Gordon from Borders on the buses issue for Cumbria. We've got, again, large amounts of green space. But the other big issue we've had to solve is going to be the cost of the vehicles, because the vehicles are obviously a lot more expensive than the conventional ones at the moment. So the cost is going to come down to make them viable.
Thank you. That's another really good thought for that. John Austin, you're the next one up.
Hi, John Austin from Moby Hub Limited. I'm a transport consultant, transport geographer. Yes, I thought electric buses were nearly there. With the Metro line into Potters Bar, I've got my concerns about them. There's obviously things that need to be fixed.
And John, sorry, I didn't catch your pronoun there. Do you use he, she, or they?
He, sorry. He.
No problems at all. Just wanted to double check.
Mm-hmm.
Next person up is Jonathan Bigwood.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Bigwood. I am he, him. I am Senior Public Transport Officer for Central Bedfordshire Council, getting back into the realms of travel line and NaPTAN data, having been there sort of in the early 2000s and drifted away for a few years into scheduling for a bus company. At Central Bedfordshire, we're also assisting our neighbouring councils at Bedford and Luton Borough working in partnership, so I've got their data to think about as well. On electric buses, mixed feelings. Having been a bus scheduler in recent years, they have got their limitations, particularly how many miles they can do a day before they need to go and recharge, which adds a layer of complication and cost. There is, of course, the vehicle cost, the battery life versus the vehicle life, and the power infrastructure. I don't know all the circumstances of what happened at Potter's Bar. Have been incidents in the past with diesel buses, and I'm sure around 100 years ago, petrol buses were sort of still not entirely reliable. We've got to move forward, or we'd still be dealing with horses.
I love that. I love that attitude. Thank you very much for that. Katrina, you're the next one up.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Katrina Dixon, and I'm working with Department for Transport on NaPTAN project to do with my content designer, basically. And my pronouns are she, her. In terms of electric buses, I agree with various things that have been said about kind of costs and feasibility, particularly in rural areas. I know in Edinburgh we have ongoing target to get to net zero by 2030, so there's a big push for electric buses, but there are also different companies that own those buses, so it becomes problematic for users as well. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
Thank you very, very much. Next person up is Lucy B. And I call them Lucy B because we've got two Lucys on the NaPTAN team. Some of you have probably met Lucy R.
Yeah, I'm sure lots of you have met Lucy R. I'm not Lucy R, but I work with her. I'm also Lucy. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a service designer on NaPTAN, so I'm thinking about the whole kind of thing, and I'm very excited to hear what you all have to say today.
Thank you. Any thoughts on electric buses?
Oh yes, sorry. I mean, huge fan. Agree with all the points everyone has made so far. I live in London, so I feel like I'm not really I can't really legitimately talk about the struggles of bus funding anywhere else. But where I'm from in Oxford, I've just found approved a fleet of 159 of them, so that'll be exciting. So yeah, I will keep you updated on how that goes.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Mark, you're the next one up. Mark Tyra. I know that I always mispronounce your surname.
Sorry, yeah. I just heard you say Mark, then I wasn't sure whether it was me or not. Mark Tyra from Transport for Greater Manchester. Data coordinator, deals with all the NaPTAN side of things, as well as all the scheduling, like the publications of everything out from bus operators. I'm a he, and yeah, but electric buses are all right. They're quite prominent around Manchester now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Richard Hall, you're the next one up.
Yes, hello. Yes, Richard Hall. I work for Ito World, pronoun he. I used to work for Northumberland County Council, where I had some involvement with creating and maintaining NaPTAN records there, and continuing that work with my present employers. On electric buses, yes, I wouldn't claim to be particularly knowledgeable or anything like that. Sound like a good idea, particularly on urban networks, I would guess. My concern might be what happens when the batteries run out.
Fantastic. Sorry, sorry, what?
What happens when the batteries run out?
Fantastic. And I didn't quite catch your pronouns. My brain is just fantastic. Thank you so much. Roger Court, you're the next one up.
Hi, I'm Roger Court. I work for Kent County Council. I do everything from NaPTAN through to smart cards. Pronouns are he, him, and my thoughts on electric buses are that while we've tried them on a few specific routes, the infrastructure isn't quite there yet.
Fantastic. Thank you. Sindhu Vincent, you're the next one up.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sindhu and my pronoun is she, her. I'm from Durham County Council. Yes, I love the idea of electric buses. I think it's brilliant, but I'm not sure if we've got sufficient superchargers for all of them. I think, especially when it's like for long distance journeys, it might kind of cause problems at this stage. But yes, it's a brilliant idea, though. Yeah, thank you.
Cheers. Thank you for that. Steve Forrest, you're the next one up. And then the last one we're going to throw it to is Adrian, just to give him a heads up. So Steve.
Can I just check my microphone's working?
Can totally hear you loud and clear.
Technology and all the rest. My name's Steve Forrest. I'm a he/him. I currently have just taken up a position with Strathlight Partnership for Transport. Previously, I was 17 years with a major bus operator who have just introduced and are commissioning about 160 electric buses, and have opened up the biggest charging facility, or one of the biggest charging facilities in one of the biggest depots in Europe, I believe. So with electric, had quite a lot of experience with it, but like some of the others, it's the ranges, etc., that need addressed.
So I know that there's some people that I haven't called on. I just wanted to ensure that we kept the intros to around 20 people. Otherwise, we get a little bit over time. So before I throw it to Adrian, does anyone else want to do an intro? Super quick. No, Adrian, you're the next one up.
Hi everyone, I'm Adrian Falconer. I'm the product owner for the redevelopment of NaPTAN. I'm a he/him, and I don't really have enough knowledge to have an opinion on electric buses, though it sounds like a good idea. Better than a petrol one, I imagine.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. So what we're going to do is I will quickly run through the quick outcomes from the last couple of meetings, because there were some points that came out of them and I just wanted to make sure that everyone's okay with them and any questions are raised. Then I'm going to do a quick summary of parts 1, 2 and 3 and the email archaeology that I have been doing back to 2006 and before, just to try to figure out what some of the intents were. And then what I'm going to go through is a possible archive service. So this is what Lucy and I have been working on, and I've kind of tried to spell out who might be doing what and just get your feedback on what that might look like. I'm going to ask you some questions about who might need to know when a stop is archived so that we've got a real sense of how we tell people. And then I'm going to ask you a little bit about other stop statuses, just to get a sense of if you're using them, if you want to use them, if you can't use them, why you can't use them, or why you could use them but you don't. And then we're going to talk about, we're going to gather feedback like we always do. So starting at the top, the quick outcomes. Trying to read some of this. So precisely and accurately. How do we know precisely and accurately where a bus stop is? Everyone puts in eastings, northings. Some people put in latitude, longitude. There is currently a proposal underway to add in latitude, longitude where it is missing. And that's a fold back, which we'll come to from the future of NaPTAN work from last week. So in the meantime, Ordnance Survey have a page on how to do this calculation, and that is the calculation we're going to use. The other big thing that came out of January's meeting on precisely where and accurately a bus stop is we now know where we measure it from, because in all of the time, there were many different places where people were measuring the bus stop from. We came to a really good passenger-focused agreement that we measure a bus stop from where the passenger needs to stand to catch the bus. That's the point that we're going to indicate on NaPTAN. Now, I don't expect everyone to go and redo all of their bus stops or anything like that. This is just the point that we're going to start working towards, so that if you ever measure a bus stop, it's from where somebody needs to stand to catch the bus, because it will enable people to know exactly where they should be standing, which can sometimes be slightly different from where the post is or where the shelter is. So just trying to get that right. Then we did some work on coaches. A coach is kind of like a bus, except there was one big difference, is the driver is responsible for storing the luggage. On a bus, the passenger is responsible for storing the luggage. So on a coach, somebody will have to take the luggage, the big suitcases, on and off the storage space underneath, and that's usually the driver who manages and facilitates that, not the passengers themselves. That is the difference. There's also a difference in distance limit, which I believe was set by the EU, because it's set in kilometres, of 50 kilometres for any bus route. So we know that there are some bus routes that are split artificially split in two, because otherwise they violate this length of a bus route, where coaches have no distance limitations on the length of their routes. One of the other things that came out of it is the coach references and the 900, the ACTO code starting 900 that were coach stops and coach stop areas are no longer required, and the data has been withdrawn and is no longer published in NaPTAN. So if you were ever looking for that, I don't think anyone was when we went through and talked about it to everybody. Nobody was using it, but just to make sure that everyone's aware that that data is now no longer published. We've got backup of it, and if you need it, it was unchanged since 2013. So if you ever had an old version of the CSV files, this data didn't change from 2013. So all that data is still there. The last session, we did street versus schema. We didn't reach a real consensus on a way forward on this. We know that we need to adjust and adapt, and the most likely option that came out is we will need to adapt the schema so that we can accurately reflect what's on the street. And one of the ones that came up is the ability to have, for example, a marked hail and ride area. A hail and ride area where, for example, the power poles have markings on them to indicate that it's a hail and ride area for any passengers. And on the last one, on the roadmap feedback, adding in the latitude longitude was the most popular request, and the solution, and we talked through what the solution might be, and it's to not overwrite any data, it's to put in the data should it be missing. And that's going to make the situation smooth out for the consumers as well as the producers, because the producers will know they've put their data in, they've done it to the best of their abilities, they've done it as accurately as they can, and if their latitude longitude is missing from their systems, there will be some kind of thing develop that will allow people who consume that to add in that data but not overwrite it. So that's what we're kind of having a look at building. Does all of this make sense to anyone? Are there any questions before we trundle along? Richard, Steve, we'll go Steve first because you've got your hand up.
Hi, just I looked at what a couple of your onlines. I only knew about this through some invitations that just came through the other day, so I'm playing catch up. One of the things with your coach definition might be worth considering adding is one of the primary differences between a coach and a bus is coaches have poles for passengers to hold on to. Coaches don't.
Ah, so a bus has poles.
Yeah.
I like that.
There's also the fact that a coach would not, as far as I'm aware, be able to facilitate the boarding of a baby in a buggy or in an actual pram. The infant would have to be removed and the pram stored underneath and then taken on and use seat belts and any kind of restraints for child. So that's another thing.
Ah, excellent.
It's
these
more
are
for equality
really, really
of
good.
access, I'm thinking. And
these are really good.
Always, to my knowledge, has a stepped entry, multiple steps.
I think there was some in the discussion. I know there was some comment about accessibility, but I literally cannot remember it right now. So hopefully somebody can remember that.
Yeah, accessibility on a coach is normally for disabled or wheelchair. There will be a separate ramp. It's actually a wheelchair lift that would take them onto that, as opposed to a normal bus would have a curb height ramp for DDA compliance.
Versus, yes. It's the ramp kneel, isn't it? Because the buses, I walk with a stick, so the buses in London always kneel for me, which I quite like.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Steve. Those are really good points.
Requires a cup height bit, but I just thought I would add those ones. That that's all I managed to get through so far. I never saw the other bits and pieces, so I put my hand down.
Thanks, Steve. Mark.
Yeah, sorry, I missed that meeting around all the coach stops and stuff like that. Now, taking away the actual physical of the vehicle, wasn't the difference between bus and coach that a bus is anyone can get on it just as a scheduled bus service, and coaches pre-booked service? Because we do actually have some coaches around here that are low floor for access, a lot of the double decker ones and stuff like that. But just in the word and the difference between bus and coach class.
The ability to pre-book, because there are some coaches that you don't need to pre-book on. You can just rock up and catch a coach from London to Edinburgh, for example. And well, you might have to buy a ticket from the ticket stand. You can just go hop on the coach. You don't need to pre-book. So we couldn't even use the word bus or coach to differentiate them, because Megabus is a coach service and Stagecoach is a bus service. So there was just, it really was trying to find a definition that was unambiguous and clear. But I do appreciate these couple of different comments, and I think that's one that we could just double down and just double check on.
And I think also coaches have to be on a tacho, where buses use the running board timetables as the tacho, and that was where the 50 kilometre stuff came in. If bus service could run within less than 50 kilometres on a timetable, and if all the coaches had to be on a physical tacho for driving hours.
Okay, that I didn't know what a tacho was. So a tacho.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
for the driving hours.
Like the lorry drivers. You know, you're recording all your driving and working hours. Whereas with the local bus services, the bus timetable, the driver running board, is what gets around that. But you're only allowed to do that if you're on routes less than 50 kilometres.
Right. Okay. That's why there's the 50 kilometre limit, because I was trying to understand why that was there, and I don't think anyone quite explained it on the day. So those are really good to know. I'll go to Gordon next.
I think it's worth noting, if we're going to, that a coach and a bus is a completely different beast. They're legally different. Their construction and use is completely different. So where I live, you can get a double-decker bus with 18 standing spaces that will happily turn onto the M74 motorway and batter down the motorway as a double-decker. It's not allowed to go into the fast lane because it's not a coach. So a bus and a coach are completely different things as mechanical vehicles. The 50 kilometre limit is for EU driving hours. If they cross the 50 kilometre, then they have less working hours. So you could have a domestic route that runs at 65 kilometres perfectly legally, but in a scheduling point of view, you would lose drivers' hours over a fortnight. But I think it's really important if you're going to talk about buses and coaches, you have to acknowledge that they are legally two separate types of vehicle. You're probably better to generalise and talk about passenger transport vehicles or something.
Oh, no, because there's different stops for them and we need to be able to differentiate them. And this was one of the questions that I was struggling with. So Gordon, you've really helped here, trying to understand the difference between a bus and a coach, because they look the same. They're a big thing. You hop and you sit on and there's a driver, and it was just trying to understand what is the difference. And yes, you're right, they are mechanically different.
There's construction is totally different. A bus is built to drive slower and have different safety cages, which is why they have a standing allowance, and a coach never will have a standing allowance. A coach, because of its construction, can go in the fast lane of a motorway and go approximately 8 miles an hour faster. It's a completely different beast from the day it's built. It's not a different taxing resource, it's a construction.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Gordon. That's also really helped, because these are things that, unless you're deep in this, you don't know, but we need to know a little bit about it to be able to make sure that we've got the stops right. Steve, let's go to you next.
Legacy hand, I think, Jay.
Legacy hand. So the next person
Sorry,
is...
not legacy hand. I just had my mute on. Do apologise for that. I want to say everything that Gordon said is correct there. All the information I gave you was based on the fact that I thought you understood they were completely different constructions of vehicle. With regards to the 50 miles in the driver's hours, that's perfectly correct as well. EU drivers legislation says 50 kilometres. Anything that goes over that then must operate utilising a tachograph, and the drivers must then follow the EU drivers regulations. So that's why you'll see a lot of services are split halfway through into multiple registrations, but appear to do one continuous journey. And
That's
finally,
so useful to know.
Although a commercial service is a bus is allowed on the motorway, it's not allowed on the motorway if anyone is standing, although it does happen. But legally, there shouldn't be anybody standing on any bus when it goes onto the motorway.
Buses and buses only has one S in the middle and not in the fast lane.
Yeah. Under any circumstances, they're not allowed in the fast lane. Only
unless, of course. Fantastic. Right, Jonathan, and then we'll move away from coaches, if that's okay with everyone.
All I was going to say is that yes, the technical definition in terms of construction and use for a coach is all very well, but I think in terms of what we're doing, it's what is a registered local bus service and what is a coach service is the difference. I mean, sort of on my patch at Luton Airport bus station, there are times when you have two vehicles next to each other. Both are high floor vehicles, which are probably legally coaches. One is on the National Express route to London, which is not a registered local bus service. It is a coach service. What in the list of time used to be considered an express service rather than a stage carriage service. Those terms are now obsolete. At the stand next to it, there is something operated by a Arriva, marketed and branded as a Green Line coach, but it is actually local bus route 757 to London, which stops at more intermediate stops. Technically, both of those vehicles are coaches, but in terms of what NaPTAN, Travel Line, Passenger Transport Information does, they are different. And I think that's where we need to be coming from for the purposes of what we're doing here.
That's a really good definition as well, Jonathan, because it's allowing a consumer, a passenger, to know which stop they're going to expect to catch, which bus/coach service from, and what they should expect from it. And this is diving down into the coach weeds. Andy, I'm going to throw it to you. If it's about coaches, this is going to be the last word on coaches before we move on, because this isn't on coaches. We'll come back to coaches, and we'll probably have to redo coaches versus local bus services at some point. Andy.
It's about stops. Isn't it now that we've got rid of the 900 coach stop group, isn't the question about a bus service and a coach service irrelevant, as there's no independent coach stop? There's only bus and coach stops.
There are still some coach stops. The 900s were coach stop areas, so they were areas that were linked to coach stops, and that's my bad. I should have put coach stop areas there because it was a grouping rather than individuals. There are still coach
but the individual stops inside them are
system.
bus stops. Yeah, but the individual stops inside them are bus/coach stops. There's no differentiate. I haven't read the schema lately, but I'm pretty sure there is no separate standard for a coach stop only. It is bus and coach.
I'm just putting a little note in, and I'll check if there's a differentiator for coach only in the schema. I'm not going to do that now because ain't nobody got time to read 120 pages live. Let's move on to how we're going to do this, but thank you, Andy, for raising that, because that's a really good point that we didn't consider, or we didn't double check. If everything's now a bus/coach stop, how do we know where we're going to catch the coach from, the express coach to London, and where we're going to catch the local service to London, and how do we tell them apart? and how do we tell them apart on our schedulers. This is going to be, that's a fun little piece that I think we're going to have to pull into another meeting. Is everyone okay with that? So we are going to focus on, we'll go up to summary of part 1. It's marked as number 3. I'll just summon everybody. It's probably going to be the easiest. Summon. So you're all coming to see me. So when we first started to discuss archiving and deleting a stop, wow, it was a can of worms. The first one of these is like, and I look at it and I'm like, mind exploding, because there was so much nuance and there was so much difference to what we anticipated. One of the things is we didn't agree much on how some of these are being used. Some of the systems that people are using have constraints that don't make sense, or we need to understand why those constraints are there. And archived as underutilized was one of the big things that came up. The summary of going through it again was that archive depended a lot on the different systems. Some systems allow archiving, some don't. And one of the things that we want to be able to do is to remove stops from the data set to clean up our databases. And for example, Tansy, and not to call out poor Tansy and somebody had a typo, and there was 3 stops that were accidentally had the wrong ACTO code because they were missing a 0. So they showed up as an error, and to remove those was me and Tansy in about a week of crying, looking at the schema and the systems, trying to figure out how to get rid of it and how to get rid of it on her system and our system in a way that worked really well. We since figured it out, which actually helped us build out the archive flow of what we need to do. What I also have done in the meantime is I got hold of Miles, and Miles and me and Adrian and any other poor person who got access to the thousands of emails did some email archaeology back to 2003, 2006. We found some of the original definitions of what was meant by an archiving service, what was originally created as a stored procedure. We uncovered that the stored procedure might not have run since an inserted date somewhere between 2013 and 2016, 2017. That seems to be the last time we're aware of the archive system actually running on the old previous NaPTAN service. So we know this has been balked for quite some time. So what we wanted to do, and what I challenged Lucy to do, was to go away and think about what an archive service would look like. And that's what I want to run through with you all here today. This is an idea of what it could look like, and we'd like your feedback to tell us whether or not we're looking in the right direction, we've got the right ideas, and what problems you foresee as either data producers, putting the data into the system and trying to keep your data set clean locally, and data consumers trying to use this data and knowing when you shouldn't be using this bus stop, when this ACTO code is deader than dead. And we've been trying to think of the right names for this list. I don't like whitelist and blacklist because racial. Calling something a blacklist is just no longer cool. Didn't want to call it a kill list because that sounded even worse. Deader than dead list. So we're just going to go with archived list, and we'll just call it archived. So a deleted stop is a stop that could come back into service. It's a stop that's not currently in use, that is still physically there and could come back in service. An archive stop is a stop that won't ever come back in service. And this can be for reasons of either it was a typo, or where it physically is has since been dug up for HS2 and is no longer going to be physically capable of being a bus stop anymore. So where that bay is now, that road doesn't even exist. The road's been redone. So we need to get rid of those stops. Does that make sense of the difference between a deleted and archived? Cool. So looking across at the possible archive service, and this is no promises, we just want to know what you think might be needed. So this is, for those who remember our different people, our different personas that we kind of built up for the different users and producers. We've got Rajani, who is a data producer. So they work at a local transport authority. They produce the NaPTAN data in their local system, and they then upload it onto NaPTAN. So first off, they identify the stops that they need to archive. These will never be used again ever stops. That's what we've called them. These can be an oopsie stop, or they can be a physically never returning stop, and it is not a stop that could ever be used again. So for example, if the road is out for 3 years, but then it's going to come back, that stop would be deleted, transferred, suspended. We'll get onto that in a moment, but that stop will eventually, as planned, to come back. It's when those stops are no longer planned to return that they would be physically archived. Now, one of the ideas that we had is they will archive these stops, and this would be a simplified bit of XML. So we don't need the full NaPTAN record for this. We just need to know that the stop should no longer be in the NaPTAN dataset. So I'm suggesting, for example, it's just the ACTO code, the NaPTAN code, and the date that we're doing this. And we'll keep a record of who does it, of course. This could be a web interface. So you just have to do it putting in the stops one by one. Or this could be a CSV file, or this could be an XML file. We're just kind of asking what this might look like. You might then, Rajani would then be presented with, here's the stops you're going to archive, confirm you're going to do this. So this is a chance for Rajani to double check that they've put the right stops in, that their list matches their list here on their data set that they want to get rid of matches what they've told us that they want to get rid of. Just a quick double check, and they then go hit the button, and then the stops are listed as archived as on our system, on the centralized NaPTAN system, and the stops are can then be removed from Rajani's database. So Rajani then goes in and does what they need to do on their system to delete those stops, and the stops are removed within their local system. Does what we're suggesting that Rajani does make sense, and is there any problems? And I see Di's busting to get their hand up first, so there must be something that's either rubbing the wrong way or really right. Di, I'm really keen to find out which way, whether we got it right or we got it wrong.
Oh, hi, Jay. The way you were describing that, and I might have got the wrong end of the stick, you're talking about archiving the stops within the NaPTAN system rather than archiving the stops within your database and then uploading a new data set.
So yes, because one of the things we need to know is those stops have been removed, and this is to allow consistency across, because the last thing we want is a stop to be removed and somebody using a bus scheduling service still able to get hold of that stop, or still thinking that that stop might be live. So what we're trying to do is build a system that allows you to delete it from your service and upload it, but also tell us you're deleting it, because that was the purpose behind archiving.
So you're talking
my
about
archaeology told me
the process. So we do it twice, once in our data set and then once again in the new data set, rather than the new NaPTAN being able to read the fact that something has changed in our uploaded data set.
We would see that some stops were missing, but we wouldn't know if they were missing because you had an incomplete export or something like that, or they were missing on purpose. So we want to make sure that the removal is purposeful, and we've got this ability to pass on to other systems, and I'll get to that in a moment when we talk about data consumption, to pass on to other systems. These are stops that have been withdrawn from service. These are stops that are in this archive state that you shouldn't ever be using.
Right, so we're doing it twice.
You're kind of doing it twice, and I'm trying to make the admin as light as possible.
Right, okay.
Is that rubbing slightly wrong inside your head?
Well, yes, because the definitive data set should be what I hold in my database, and that's what everything
very much so.
on.
Yes, and we totally respect your data and acknowledge that your data is the only correct data.
So it just seems a bit daft to have to do something twice. I mean, I understand your reasons for doing that. You want to know for definite, but it just seems a bit sort of strange that I update my definitive data set and then have to amend another data set to reflect my definitive one, rather than just uploading it from the definitive.
I can see that, and that is another option for us to do a diff every or look at the difference between the file you've uploaded in your last file and anything that's missing we then mark as archived. That would be another way of doing this. This way I was trying to make the archiving very purposeful, and that we would always have a complete record of when something was withdrawn from service. Because that was one of the things that came out of the email archaeology as why the archive service was created in the first place. So if our needs have changed in the last 20-something years, and I believe they have, we've gotten much better, much smarter with data, much more in control of it, then I'm totally okay with changing how Rajani does this. We can do this in a number of different ways. Okay. I really appreciate your thoughts on that. Can I throw it to Tricia next, just to get your thoughts, Tricia?
Well, in the past, the only way local authorities were ever able to archive stops was to send a list directly to the DFT. We were never able to do it in the systems. And my system at the moment only allows me to have stops that are active or inactive. So inactive, as you know, is a term for deleted. So my system wouldn't allow me to inactivate them anyway and make them archived. And it was only at the point of entry where we wanted them removed and completely that we'd approach the DFT to be able to do that. So I mean, I have a load of bus station stops that's now been built over that I could archive, but they're just kind of sat there in an inactive state at the minute.
Yeah, and those are the stops that I'm thinking of, Tricia, because there isn't any way for us to archive them at the moment. With the redeveloped NaPTAN, we've not built in the service because the version up on old NaPTAN hadn't worked for such a long time. Even if you told us, we couldn't have gone and made it happen. So what I'm trying to understand is what we should do. So you would have control of being able to archive them rather than sending it to DFT. So we're devolving that control, and possibly we could devolve it even further, as Di suggests. And if systems allow people to delete stuff, we could then use our systems to detect when stuff has been deleted and create the archived file that way. Yeah, that's a really good thought.
Yeah, it would make sense as well for the software suppliers if they could add the function into the NaPTAN databases that we use. Add that function of archiving in, because not all systems will have that function.
And that's such a good point. Just before I run on to Mark, can you remind me which system you're using, Tricia?
I'm using the Trapeze Novus FX system.
Just let me make a note. Trapeze can't archive. Trapeze.
Yeah, well, my version can't. Whether another local authority's version is different,
Nova.
But mine can't.
FX. Yeah, that's okay. It's knowing the different systems is going to help us quite a bit. Knowing those differences. Right. Thank you for that. Mark.
Okay, I'm going to throw something else in here now, because we get in terms of deleted and inactive. Now, both of them are proper things within NaPTAN, because an inactive flag doesn't necessarily, in the outputs of NaPTAN, actually mark a stop as deleted. I think the inactive is mainly to temporarily close a stop, which would reopen again, in a few weeks. Maybe it's just for roadworks, although so it would kind of take it out of the system. And then you had a deleted, which actually fully marked it deleted, which that was your intention. You've dug a stop up out of a road. And now in the old archiving specifications that there were before, hence us having to upload it separately to archive a stop, was a stop had to be closed for 2 years to make sure it wasn't something you wanted to bring back by accident. And I think the idea of archiving something in a separate list rather than within our own XML is that it'd take it completely out of the XML and you still don't have an ever-growing list in your own system of all millions of legacy stops in there that are live, inactive, deleted and archived, because we've had 6,500 deleted stops in our system for quite a while, and we've been waiting and waiting to try and just get rid of them so we can shrink our system down and just not have them in our system at all anymore.
You're exactly the people we want to help, Mark, and that's why we're trying to think of how we do this in the best way possible that allows as many different systems to interact with this in ways that work.
Yeah, I think because of that, I don't think any NaPTAN systems actually have any archiving option in, because the idea is archive stops is something you don't ever want to see again, and you just want to purge it rather than keep populating and uploading a full-on data set saying, well, this is live, this is inactive, this is deleted, this is archived. I just want to get rid of them. So if we uploaded an archive full set saying these are the 6,500 we want to archive, and then our system then sort of has a look at that archive list and just takes it back out and then to never be used again.
That's exactly.
So if that's where I put the notes on there. If we could put the CSV, because with us having that many, I can sort out by date all the ones that I've deleted for, or my predecessors deleted many years ago, and maybe I can just leave the last year or two's worth of deleted stops in case they are ones that I want to, they may be where the roads are, where they might come back again in the future. Anyway.
So just super quickly, one of the reasons for us removing that I thought of for removing the limitation of time, because it used to be anything that was deleted for X amount of time could be run through it, was there are some oopsie stops. There are those typo stops that you just want to get rid of. I don't want you to have to sit there and wait with an oopsie stop for 2 years just because I put a clock on it. Let's put you in control.
I think ideally, that was what it was before. I mean, ideally, we all want the option to just archive something that we have made a mistake on. I don't want to sort of keep. I think for me personally, I don't want to keep them in my system here all the time and having to sit with it. And all these, still upload and archive out of my own system for so long. I think
that's kind of why we were. Thank you, Mark. That's really, and your thoughts are what led me to kind of thinking of it as like a separate list that's very, very lightweight to upload, very lightweight to manage. And the moment you've told us that it's archived, you can do what you like in your own system. You can delete it, you can hit your database, you can go and use SQL injection to get rid of it if you need to, but we've got a list of them so we can tell people, and that's the next part I'll get onto in a mo.
It would be good if our own NaPTAN program could then look at that archive list and see, have it the reversed way, so it'll just purge it out of our own system.
That's a brilliant idea, and that's part of what I've tried to build a little bit further down. So we'll get down to the rest of the service in a mo, but I'll throw it to Tricia first because her hand was up next, unless it's a legacy hand.
It was a legacy hand, sorry.
Then Dan Saunders is next.
Hi, yes. I just want to take a step back a little bit. So what is the current process in NaPTAN at the moment? So it's basically they marked as there's none. So there's marked as deleted, and you get the modification date, and that effectively shows it, and then that deleted list is getting longer and longer and longer.
Yes, and there was an archive service that was created in the before time, a while ago, and it ran until, and I'm going to take my best guess, somewhere in 2013 to 2016, when technologies changed, the service failed and nobody noticed. It was a stored procedure that ran. So it hasn't run since 7-8 years. So there's a whole pile of deleted stops that I believe Mark and pretty much everybody's dealing with that should possibly have been gotten rid of in the old service. It's just never run, and we're trying to now figure out what to do for the future, because what used to work hasn't worked for a long time, but we want to create something that works, that meets everybody's needs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. I've got a few more comments, but I think we're going to come across them later on, so I'll hold them for now.
Take a note, and if we don't come across them, bring them up. Andy.
Yeah, originally, like as many people have said, it was just so we can delete them off our local system. So the CSV file we can use for a SQL script, so that will delete all of them off our local system. If we can then keep the SQL script, if we can keep the CSV, we can then check that we don't reuse those ATCO codes in new stops. Now, that brings on to another way. If we could reuse our codes, we wouldn't need to archive our stops. We could just reuse the ATCO code and the SMS code on other new stops. It would reduce or remove the need to archive the stops. But then again, that was another rule inside the schema, that you can't move a stop more than so many meters, and you can't rename and things like that. So, it's there's a schema thing to change. One of the things you said earlier was if you uploaded the XML and it didn't have a stop on, you could assume it was deleted. The trouble with that is some stops could be not in the XML by error. You can't check whether it's an error or if we meant to archive it. So I think you would have to have a separate way, like the CSV file, to make sure that an archive stop was confirmed as archive, because at that same stage, I'm going to delete it off my local database.
Thank you, Andy, and I think you've hit it there, because we know. So this is one of the things that we need to consider when we look at the schema. Are the rules that we put on the schema the right rules for now? If we could get rid of all of this archive stuff, if we could say to Mark, you've got 6,000, although Mark would probably say, I'd like to get rid of them. But if we could say to Mark, you can reuse these 6,000 numbers. Why, and this is maybe another bit of archaeology for us to go do, is to figure out why there was that limitation of reusing NaPTAN codes and ACTO codes. What was the purpose of that? And is that purpose still served? Or can we allow that now? What is the confusion that it could create? But I think
the reason why it wasn't allowed to reuse it, because if a user of the NaPTAN data hadn't updated their data in a timely fashion, they could be tracked to a stop that you've now moved 3 miles away, and their tracking is going to go all over the place. So that, although now every system should be updated weekly, I suppose, with NaPTAN or
someone else mentioned it in another meeting as well, about sort of doing historical reporting and stuff as well. And if they're trying to report some data using stops that have been, if they've been moved, it sort of messes it all up a bit. I think that was part of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's really good to know. Thank you, Mark. Lucy, we're going to have to do some work thinking about some of these and put some of these assumptions and pieces on here so that we can really make it clear why we're doing this. Gordon, you've got some thoughts.
Hello, I've got the latest Novus open, and to me it highlights the problem. So under status, I've got active, inactive, pending, and archive. We're not allowed to use pending or archive. Pending actually means pending deletion, which is really strange to me. We opened a train station recently, and then 6 weeks before I created a stop and put it pending. And the voices that could be from our data manager in Glasgow brought it very swiftly. So we only have active or inactive, and we have town centres that have followed the national trends, are now pedestrian zones, and we do occasionally have visiting bus companies who will pick up an inactive stop because they haven't got their filters set. So to me, I can't see any reason to keep a stop that's not actually in use in a cupboard somewhere. Maybe metropolitan reasons have, but why not just build a new one every time? It doesn't take 5 minutes to create a new stop.
I think that's a really good point. Thank you, Gordon. And I'll get on to a little bit as we move down towards the data consumers as to why we think they need to know about these stops, but it'd be really, really good to understand. And I think you're right. The problem we're trying to stop is people picking up inactive stops, and that's been part of producing an API so that people can get the freshest, most recent data on almost an instant. Every time you want the data, you can just grab the data. And if we do something really funky in the future of only giving you what's changed, you can download, just move the stop or just tweak the stop slightly, and that's it. You don't have to download the entire data set and do it every time. But that's future stuff. We need to focus on this archive deleted stuff for now. Trying to hold myself together. Steve.
Just to be clear with my experience from utilising NaPTANs, not as somebody who's uploading it, there are a large number of users out there who do not deliberately do not update NaPTAN on a weekly basis due to inconsistencies and inaccuracies within it. So therefore, if they've cleaned their system to make, and as somebody that used to have a major system for a bus operator with over 200 services running, when that system was cleaned, the last thing anyone was allowed to do was update my NaPTAN, because we worked in partnership with the local councils, etc., and the local organisations to make sure that this was updated. And we did a massive survey of all 12,500 stops that we went to get GPS locations updated, etc. But it's not there yet. This is part of what you're doing. So the idea that somebody out there might not have something historically reused in a different position is a very real fact. And if you were to reuse an ATCO code at this time without ensuring that absolutely everybody's aware you're going to do that, then you could have some major issues with Travelline, with Google, with bus services, ticketing, zonal recording, all kinds of things. So that's a big problem. I would be very careful about reusing at the moment. Reusing ones that have been out of action for 20 years, yeah, of course, but anything that's local, in the last 5-10 years, you need to make sure that those haven't been updated.
Thank you, Steve. That's really good thoughts. And I think I'm pleased we've now finally made contact, thanks to Gillian, in fact, who managed to bounce us around and get us in contact with you. So we'll, I think we should set up a meeting and just kind of catch you up, but also go through and find out the pieces that you've got that we might not have thought about.
Okay.
So now I'm going to move on and just talk about, just moving across very slightly, this, I've got a little if you all find me, I'll just do a summon everybody again. You'll see there's this redeveloped NaPTAN, MPTG NaPTAN. This is just what the system is going to do. There's no person involved. It's just what the system will do. So what they'll do is they'll take the stops that Rajani's provided and they will add them to the archive list. So stops are added to the archive list that'll be produced by the service. The list has minimal information because it doesn't need to have all the stop names and all of that stuff. It just needs to tell you this code no longer in use. That's all that we think it needs. If you think we need to put more there, let us know. But that's honestly what I think. We can make it as minimal as possible, as lightweight as possible. The archive list is only available as a national download. We won't do it by local authority because it's not going to be massive. Okay, Mark's going to add 6,000 to it, but it's not going to be the 600,000 or plus rows that the current NaPTAN list has. It's going to be a shorter subset of that. So it's not going to be huge. So just a national list should be enough. Let us know. But also you could then filter it down to just be the area that you're interested in. But it's going to be small enough that just doing a quick filter is going to be fine. First off, it's going to be published as an XML and possibly published as a CSV. So just let us know here and feel free to give us feedback as to whether a CSV file is going to be best. An XML, we know that you can take and use in different systems. And then what we're also going to do is that XML that's telling us about archive stops, we will use to check uploads. So what we would do is when you upload a file, we would check if you're accidentally using any, if you've told us you've deleted a stop, we would check if it's, and you've forgotten to take it out of your system or somebody's accidentally put it back in, that would then flag up as an error because we would say to you, hey, you've just uploaded a stop as being live and yet it's on our archive list. Do you want to just go and check this? So it's just giving that double check for you so that you're not, so that if you've told us that you've archived it, it's actually been archived. And we know that with some of the larger transport authorities, you've got 2 or 3 staff working. So it's just a little quick double check that nobody's left hand's done one thing, right hand's done another, and they aren't quite in sync. This is just a last little check. Is there anything here of what NaPTAN would be doing? Oh, I see lots of thumbs up. I'm quite liking this. Is there anything here that NaPTAN would be doing that sounds wrong or sounds like it's not going to give you what you want? Jonathan, I see a thumbs up from Steve, by the way.
I may just have misunderstood this, but I think if the archive list is just going to hold the ATCO code and the SMS code, it's then going to be hard to work out just what stop that is if in 2 years' time there's a query about that stop. I thought it'd be worth including the stop name in the archive list as well.
Good point. Good point.
Especially for someone who's got 6,000 stops they want to archive.
That's a really good point. Let me just quickly run backwards, and I'm going to put that against here with Rajani's list of what they need to provide us. It's going to also include name. Cool. Is there so Dan, your thoughts?
Yeah, so let me give a use case of how we utilise historical NaPTAN that might be deleted or inactive at the moment. So we have the last 10 years worth of TNDS data built every week, and quite often we'll get approached saying, what was the timetables like in 2014 in the second week? Because we want to analyse how the bus network in the UK differs from 6 years ago, 7 years ago, 8 years ago. So these historical NaPTANs are really, really important with all their information for that historical analysis. So if you're just going to store a very limited amount, so not even a coordinate for that NaPTAN stat or anything like that at all, that makes that impossible for us to do. So we did have to archive ourselves every week what the NaPTAN was like that week, which just it seems like a duplication of work for us at the moment. So I'd strongly suggest if you are going to have archive as a separate list and strip all that stuff out, you need to retain all the information that can be downloaded as part of that. A local authority could upload just the code and everything else, but actually the full detail needs to be available for download for us kind of consumers.
So before I'm just going to dive ever so slightly into that. When you say everything, do you mean the MPTG data? Do you mean the full record, or do you mean
the whole
the stop, the location? Okay,
so every field you find in the stops, yeah. I
think every field. I'm just trying to find out if there are some fields you're telling me about that you don't actually need. People can spot my questioning here because I'm just trying to understand like stop areas. Do you need to know the stop area? Do you need to know all of the MPTG locations or just its locality? I'm just trying to understand if there's data we can strip out, because there's like 6 different name fields. Do you only need one of them? Because we don't use a lot of the fields. I'm just trying to make it as easy as possible for the Rajanis of the world, just to understand how much data I can strip out before it makes your life too hard.
So I don't have the answer to that question. All I know is that we give them NaPTAN and say, this is, all your stuff is marked as deleted in here. It's fine. You can just use the NaPTAN stops.csv and all the information is there, and you can see when it was deleted as part of it. The problem would be if we then start saying to people who've written importers for NaPTAN, actually your archive is going to only have 8 columns of data. They may need to write a new importer for that. So you're starting to then require people downstream to write new import routines for SQL and things like that.
I think you would have to, and we'll have a look at what I'm suggesting further on. But I've just made a little note there on that, and we'll put a pin in that. And if I don't answer it in the next bit, we'll come back to it.
Okay, sounds good.
Is that okay? Andy?
I was going to answer Dan's one. If you're archiving stuff, if you're looking at data that was 10 years old, you cannot look at NaPTAN now, because NaPTAN from 10 years to now, it has changed dramatically. NaPTAN is not a static data set. It is constantly moving. We have thousands of updates or hundreds of updates a week in the data set that I look after. If you're looking at what your tracking was 10 years ago, you need your NaPTAN from 10 years ago as well. And so therefore the archiving, like you said, Dr. J, with the ATCO code and the SMS code is fine, because that's all we have to make sure we don't use. And for historical purposes, the local database users should be able to store it anyway. We've got to send you the list of our data that's going to be archived. At that stage, you can say, well, here's all the data that we may need in the future to know what they are. So in the archive, for the purpose of NaPTAN, you only do need to record what you've got on the archive. So ATCO code and SMS code.
So Lucy B, this might be an interesting one, because I know that we're looking at data retention. Let's set up a meeting with Dan to sit down and understand some of Dan's use cases, and then I think we can do one of these around data retention and what do we need to meet everyone's need for the future, and not put lots of load on local authorities to maintain records. Does that make sense? I can't see your face, so I'm just assuming there's a thumbs up.
That does make sense, yes. And thank you, Dan.
Fantastic. Mark?
I was just going to say, if it was from someone like us uploading saying we want to archive this stop, and we just submit the ATCO code, NaPTAN code, whatever, I mean, how much more trouble would it be for yourselves for them to just go, okay, well, we'll move all the details of this stop into an archive database and retain all the last known details of that stop with this archive date. And then if anyone does want to interrogate it for whatever, all the information still there.
That's a really, really good idea, and thank you for that. I hadn't thought of that use case, and I think that's a really good way to fulfill that use case with minimal effort from the man who's got 6,000 of these things to do. So it's obviously looking at what's the least I can do and what can I get the system to do. So let's consider that, and I know that we need to come back and we need to run another one of these on data retention and how archiving links into it and all of that. So that will be a future thing, I think. Right. Is there any other thoughts on the NaPTAN stop to archive list? There is to be minimal information, but these need to be filtered up. Okay, there's some thumbs up and there's some ideas there. Right. Now I'm going to run on to, I've got 3 personas, or 2 personas in a system, and this is what we knew from all of the research that we've done on how people would use an archive list. So Nikki is a data consumer who they consume the data and they make a consumer app on somebody's phone for their local bus company. So they download the archive list so that they can ensure that those stops are not used on their app. They're not showing their stops that they know that have been removed or replaced. They could either do it manually via the website or automated via an API. I don't 100% know why they would need this, and that's one of the questions to this group and to anyone watching this. If you are a Nikki, would you need the archive list, or would you just take the latest NaPTAN list? Because that's an interesting question to ask of somebody building a consumer app. The other person, we've called them Min. They're a bus operator. And I know there's going to be a lot of talk on this one. For them is to update any impacted routes. So they would then download the archive list and ensure that they have no routes that are using stops that are on the archive list. Now, would they need to do this, or would they download, or would they only download the latest data? Now, I know Steve has told me, and many people have told me, that there's a lot of work that goes into getting the NaPTAN data into a lot of the bus scheduling systems. So this is a way of going, these stops should not be used. So kind of quickly flagging them or pulling them out. Now, I know that's some development work, and I know that's a problem for a lot of people. I'm just trying to think of how this might need to be used and linked up. Steve, I can see your hands up because I know that you've got thoughts.
Very simple answer to that. The majority of systems that utilize NaPTAN data and then import transit exchanges to show routing information will automatically flag any mismatches. So if you try to put any kind of stop into a route that isn't contained within the NaPTAN database that you have held within your system, it'll throw up a flag. So if you get to the point where everyone's using the NaPTAN database, then that won't be an issue. It's already built into all the systems that they have there. Anything that conflicts, that misses, leaves a gap, or doesn't match the timetables, routes, tracks, or maps that are built into that transit exchange file will flag an error.
Fantastic. So you almost don't need it. You wouldn't need the archive list because you'd be using the freshest of fresh NaPTAN.
If you get
squeaky
to that
fresh
point
and
where
brand, yeah.
If everybody can then trust that everything is up to date and everybody is using it, then that's where you would be.
We want to get everybody to that point of using the freshest of freshest NaPTAN data, because that's going to make life so much easier. So the last one is for the BODS system. And unfortunately, we don't have anyone from BODS who's made it today. One of the things that they've been asking us for when we've had conversations with them is being able to check if any of the routes that are published to BODS via whatever systems are accidentally using an archive stop. So we would be able to have an automated checker for them that they can just grab an archive and grab the archive list via an API, putting my teeth back in, archive list via an API, and then they can check any of the uploaded routes to make sure that they are not using anything from the archive list. So that's what we thought it might fix. Andy, your thoughts?
On the BODS system, if you upload a service tracked to a deleted stop, it will invalidate your record. So if you make sure that the stop is deleted for a set period of time before it is set as archived, it will overcome that problem. You'll never have a service track to unless it's been not updated for a very long time, I would assume.
So if you're using the freshest of freshest NaPTAN data, this is all going to be sweet. The archive list would just be like a little double check to make sure that you're not tracking to a stop that was previously deleted, or was put in as an oopsie. But I very much doubt any of the oopsies would make it through to BODS either. Steve, is this a legacy hand, or do you have thoughts on BODS?
No, it's not legacy, it's backup. With regards to BODS, it's exactly the same as Transit Exchange now, and that's the fact if you try to load a Transit Exchange or a BODS file into any of the main systems that are operating like Ticketer or Novus, anything like that, it'll fail to import on schema violation by not matching NaPTAN. which creates a totally different problem, which was in the email about ghost stops and stuff, which we could talk about another time. But that's something that's come in as a result of pods. So if it's not in the NaPTAN database, your file just won't import.
Okay, so it's really weird. We've kind of almost come to the point of we're producing an archive list that nobody's going to use. So one of the things that we might need to do is just take a breath and look at what we actually need to do and what the uses of this archive list might be. We know that it might be needed for historical reporting. We know that it might be just something that we need to have as a double checker somewhere. But it sounds like just the deleted status is getting us through most things. But I know that we need to give something off to the data producers. So poor Mark can get rid of his 6,000 stops that he is just going to tell me he wants to get rid of again, aren't you, Mark?
No, I was just going to say, who's going to use the archive list? Wasn't part of the whole new NaPTAN just to have an API that only updates changes rather than produces a whole set? So somewhere in that respect, because they said, I think we were going from, well, if you've just made a stop and it's gone live, but then we've made a mistake in one of the oopsie stops and you just want to archive it straight away, all of a sudden it's gone live, but then gone straight out of the live NaPTAN set. If they're only doing updates only, they'll need to know what to try and take out of the whole set, as opposed to this stop's just been updated and deleted and it's still published in the live set.
Yeah, so I think we need to sit down. So the API has the potential in the future to be update only. At the moment, it's giving you all of the data set. So whenever you grab it, it's giving you all however many megs it is. I think it's 300 and something megs of data. Once we get rid of your 6,000 stops, it'll be a slightly smaller data set nationally as well. There are selfish reasons for getting rid of your stops. If we then, one of the things that we're looking at for the future is, can people just start to use only the changes? So if you download it, say in January, for the next 6 months, you only need to pick up the updated changes, pick up what's been changed. And for NaPTAN, that's only going to be a couple of hundred stops a day maximum, a couple of thousand stops a week. For MPTG, it's about 6 stops a week or 6 changes a week. So they're really, really small numbers of things that you need to pick up each time. And if we can get everyone's system picking up the freshest data that way, this is going to stop the need for some of these things. But this service in the meantime will possibly need to be there, and we just want to have a look at what we need it for and ensure that it's stable and it lets people get rid of stuff. Andy, stop my rant.
Sorry, me again. Yeah, you mentioned there that you don't need to keep the list. Well, if you don't keep a list of what stops have been archived, how are you going to check that you aren't reusing an old archived stop code? Also, all of us stop producers or data managers, we change our systems every now and then. If we lose our list of archive stops, we have to be able to get them from somewhere. So that's why I'd like to be able to download the archive list. We've just taken on, or a couple of years ago, we took on the Highlands and Islands of Scotland, and I have no idea what archive stop lists they have. So,
Neither do I. In fact, I think the one person who might have that answer would be Adrian, who can possibly go and hit the old database and see if it can spit out a list of the archive stops for Highlands and Islands, or Islands and Highlands. I can't remember which way around to say it.
Yeah, possibly. I'm not sure.
And it is Highlands and Islands.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
If anyone needs that, let me know and we'll have a look. Otherwise, I won't.
So for full transparency, we do still have the old database floating around, and we can get to it. We've just basically got to go and kind of hit it with a few rocks and see what it will spit out for us in different ways. So it's still there if you need stuff like the old archive list and things like that. But Andy, you've brought up a really good need point, which I didn't include here. So I will need to include that of somebody who's changing systems. When Rajani changes systems, they need to have access to the archive list to make sure their system has all of their archived, knows that those stops are archived and doesn't try and reuse them. So that's a really good point. Darcy.
Yeah, hi. Just wanted to pick up on a point you mentioned just a second ago. I think you asked a question around, is sort of, partial updates or something like that of interest. I think you said that. I can't remember what the question was, but at the moment, the new API is a queryable URL, isn't it? Which you can either return the whole data set or a subset of the data set as XML or CSV. Are you posing a different type of download query, or what did you mean by that point you made?
So at the moment, you can query the API. Sorry, I'm trying to be technical, so give me a second to formulate the words around the right way. I can write a query on the API that says either give me CSV or XML, and either give me this full list or give it to me for these ACTO codes. In the future, the same language can be used to say, give me everything since the state. But we haven't built that since the state part of that query engine in there yet. But that's also possible with the technology that we've used. We just haven't done that last piece to say, give me only the updates since the state.
Yeah, that's what. So I would say that would be useful. Preferable.
So
in fact,
yeah. So that's something that we can put into our backlog and have a look at. Should we start to produce APIs that you can add that extra query to? So you can say, give me the XML file national with only the updates for the since last Monday, and just get that. So you're getting the freshest data every day.
Last Monday, yeah. I mean, it's updated on a daily basis anyway, so it needs to be a bit more,
we can get as granular as you like, although I wouldn't like to get down to the half second.
The time frame has to be shorter rather than weeks, because we do it in daily anyway. So, okay, thank you.
Yeah. So, and just to be clear to everyone, instead of downloading the whole data set on a daily basis, you'd just download the bits that have changed, and that would be probably based on modified date. So we'd go through and find everything that's got a modified date or something in those things. Thank you, Mark. Gordon.
I can't remember what the other area was.
Now you've blown my mind. I'm trying to do too many things, and you've kicked off my stutter. Gordon, it's you're up.
Yeah. Thank you. It was just as one of the first speakers said as we started. There seemed to be an awful lot of double data checking here. Certainly in Scotland, the local authorities list is supposed to be the pure list, and as soon as it's altered and put up to yourselves, we expect it to change, which it does. I get slightly nervous at the idea that the change won't take place. It could be published on your list. We then have a server down, or somebody moves on to another task, and you then end up with two data sources which are different. It just seems luck that whether it's a millisecond or a couple of days in between, if it happened on a Friday, some operator is going to take a new snapshot. So it's just that, especially if it's an oops, if you're lucky enough to have junior staff sitting entering something, which we don't have, it's myself. If I sit and make an oops, because our NaPTAN system automatically selects Aberdeen as the coding place. If you don't notice that, you create a stop in Aberdeen, and then you have to get in touch with half a dozen outside agencies to delete it. So to me, the great attraction of the oops is you just press the button and oops it. Then when you upload, so I'm getting a bit nervous about the idea that we then wait for a archive list to double check what we've done.
I think that's a good thing to unpack. Can we leave that one just for now? Because I think we need to go away and take these things on board and do a little bit of tweaking to this and kind of spell out a little bit more how this is going to work and take these bits on board. Lucy and I need to go through and figure this out. And I've got just in it because we've got about half an hour left, and I just want to run it through with everybody. Is that okay? So I just had a quick question. Let me just get my cursor into the right place. So at number 5, let me just pull this across. And this may be nobody needs to know. So we've got all of the people that we've talked about. We've got Kelly, plus Kelly, who does policy management. So this is assuming that you've got a big local authority like TFL or TFGM, where you've got layers of people and it's not just one person, or one person doing multiple places. We've got somebody who does the policy management. We've got Rajani, who manages data. We've got Jerry, who uploads stops. We've got Min, who's a bus operator, and we've got Nikki, who makes a regional consumer app. So I want to understand if any of these people need to know if a stop is archived in my local authority, in the local authority that I'm working on, in a neighbouring local authority where I might have a bus route that crosses, or nationally. Is there any need for any of these people to know? I'm just going to take a break. I'm going to give you, I'll put a little timer on for a minute, because I don't think this is going to be a very long conversation, very long moment, but there'll be some decent conversation. And just throw a sticky on if you think that somebody needs to know, and also possibly why they would need to know, what they would do with that information. This is just trying to help people stay in touch with what's going on.
5 minutes later.
So Richard, the summary report that is showing on the old system may or may not show information that's on the new system. So that could be a really interesting thing. Adrian, do you have a quick thought of which way round this is? I'm just going to throw it to you because you nodded.
So that page will show everything that has been amended by local authorities, but it won't show any changes that we've made recently to centrally managed stops. So it will be correct for archive stops as for now. But when we move to the new system and have people uploading files in the next few weeks, it will become, well, we're not going to archive any stops in the next few weeks, so that part of it won't become incorrect, but other parts of it will become incorrect. And we'll hopefully have a new last submissions page coming soon.
5 minutes later.
Okay, I'm going to have to read all the way back through that. But that all makes sense. And thank you, Darcy, for pointing out that I completely forgot the passenger. So bad as a user designer. I carefully did everything but the passenger in this. So we just had the bing bong. Let me just have a quick look. I'll give people a second to finish those. Min, the bus operator, we've got them down as an end user. We've got to remove any stops from active to deleted archive that may be in their routes. So they will need to know about this. Manage and upload stops to the same person to work on NaPTAN. Most places are the same person. In fact, Kelly, Rajani and Jerry are often one person, 3 hats. I see Gordon laughing because I believe that's Gordon's life, is Gordon is playing all 3 of those parts. However, we are aware that some of the larger local authorities and metropolitans, and I'm looking at Mark to nod, have these multiple layers of people. They have somebody who gets to do all the policy, and they have somebody who's just doing all the typing, and somebody like Mark sitting in the middle kind of managing some of this. Is that right?
The only people we have other than us that make some decisions of new stops, who do all the legality side of it and health and safety side of it all. But after that, it's down to us. Sometimes they'll tell us when a stop's been dug up. Yeah, new stops and closed stops, they come from them. But we'll be the ones who decide I'm guessing if we want to archive it or not.
So that's actually a really
Yeah.
good point that we need to
Yeah.
put back under who decides to archive a stop, because Rajani is trying to sit there and go, do I just delete the stop or do I archive it? And that's possibly a local decision that'll differ across some local authorities as well, and by circumstances.
Yeah, because I think my initial bit will be just to archive a load of stops that have not been used for donkey's years, and then for the last couple of years just see what stops have been deleted just because, you know, the road and infrastructure around there is just completely changed and never go back. And if the road is still there, I'll leave them deleted so that I can reuse them again if a bus route decides to go down and we put the bus stop plate back. Because at one point we were panicking about running out of SMS codes.
Have you stopped panicking about running out of SMS codes, or is it still a problem?
It depends which farm of the schema you try and read on what the format of this SMS code is.
I'm very aware of that, and I think that's something that we need to sit down and have a look at. Is and it sounds so detailed, but getting into that SMS code, it's because it's used for all the QR code or some of the QR code generation, as far as I'm aware as well.
Yeah. It was just about how many characters was it supposed to be? Because some just said a 5-character code, and then some said 8-character code or 8 or 9-character code and stuff like that. Now we've got the first 3 characters as our mandatory apart from Manchester, and then it was, well, does the 5-character include that 3, or was it after that 3? If it was after that 3, we were running out. But anyway, we've got around it, and we now have just a minimum of 5 altogether, and it's not throwing any errors out to us.
I'm pleased to hear that, but that's another piece that I think we need to. I love the way that I'm just adding to the list of we need to look into this. Di.
Hi, just to say I have run out of SMS codes, so and that is a problem. I mean, back in the very early days, you were given the option to download however many you could, something like 200, 1,000 or 3,000. And at the time, I think I did 1,000 per authority. And then at one point we changed systems, and I didn't realise till much later that the majority of my spare SMS codes had disappeared. So, yeah.
I think our system just generated it just based on, you know, the criteria that it had to be a different letter off a different keypad, which is an old legacy system.
Yes.
How many people?
It's made for the.
Do any of you know actually how many people still use this SMS code?
We used to get statistics, but
is it from Travel Line?
It was from our local Northeast Travel Line when that existed. And I've certainly had nothing for a large number of years, so I don't.
I've just been, you know, it was only 10 minutes ago I was asking about this to my gaffer, but we've not had anything for years.
Can I just say, the SMS code, it isn't the SMS code, it is the NaPTAN code, and that is the code that is provided on Google. So the APCO code is the local authority code. The NaPTAN code, which is the SMS code technically, but that is the one that Google uses. If you click on any bus stop in the country, you're presented with that code.
They do use it, but it's not mandatory. All of our hail and ride stops don't have it on. So the bus stop will be there. It just won't show that technical SMS code there. But the NaPTAN code was the optional field in NaPTAN. APCO code's the mandatory one, which is what we keep trying to encourage some journey planners to use.
Before this dives into a deep dive into NaPTAN and ACTO codes, let's hold a little catch up on that. I'm seeing Adrian do a thumbs up on that, and ensure that people have enough, and we also understand how they're used, because I know some places use them to generate the QR codes on the site on the physical stops for reading the timetables, and I know that there are other ones who use the ACTO code for doing that, and it is so let's get all of that together and just understand how it's used, and then we can help Trisha and people who've run out of codes into how to make new codes, and also ensure that we are using codes that are sensible, and we have rules for codes that are sensible, because the number of T9 interfaces is really, really low now, because that's the code for using the keypad. Anyway, enough geekery. Let me just quickly run back to what we're focusing on, which is in my LA and in a neighboring local authority, do I need to know when stuff's archived? So Rajani needs to know to update NaPTAN, then manage the workload data, to remove any stops from there. Right, I need to zoom in to read the next one. Would need to know for cross-boundary. Would need to know for ESBR purposes and also for BODs if the operator is creating and uploading their own timetable data across local authority routes which exist. Could somebody tell me what ESBR means, or EBSR? Sorry.
It's the electronic registration for bus operators.
Electronic
bus service registration.
Appreciate it. It was just a acronym that I couldn't quite place. To remove stops from cross-boundary services in their system, would inform equivalent person adjacent LA if served by a cross-boundary service. And nationally, it's mostly only people who are most people are only needing to look locally or at neighbouring authorities. There's very few reasons to look nationally. Thanks, Sue, for your time. Really appreciate it. Matching against TransExchange. Excellent. Right, in the last 15 minutes, we're just going to do a very quick one. There are 3 other statuses. We've mentioned them before. I know that what's in the schema and what we might do and what we might want to do might not all perfectly match. So let's take 2 minutes, take a deep breath. The schema might say something. You all know that you get null point for quoting the schema back to me. I want to understand what you do with it and what you'd like to do with it. So null point for quoting the schema back. So I need to know what pending, what suspended, and what transferred mean to you, if you'd like to use them, and if you can use them. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes maximum to throw some thoughts up about those 3 different stop statuses. For getting archived and deleted for the moment, I want to know if you can use pending and what you'd like to use it for, if you can use suspended and what you'd like to use it for, and if you can use transferred and what you'd like to use it for. So just give me what you would like these to do. Nil point for quoting the schema. And let me just put a timer on. And I love the way that I say nil point as if I watch Eurovision. The one and only time I watched Eurovision, well, I watched it twice, when Rise Like a Phoenix won and Manskin won, or Manskin, the Italians won, because I love a good bit of rock.
5 minutes later.
So Trisha, is that a legacy hand that you've got up? Just checking.
Yeah, it is. Sorry, I keep forgetting today.
No worries. I was just wanting to make sure before we launched into this.
My brain's focused on the non-responsive transport and introducing a new app so people can book the bus. It's been a bit crazy this week.
Is this your Uberish bus, Uber-like bus things?
Yeah, I'm
that
not allowed.
Are not using a brand name in the description.
Yeah, I'm not allowed to use that word in the description, but yes, it is a bus that does that.
This is very much. Is this very much like the one? Sorry, I'm just going to natter while everyone's doing their thing. Tell me if it's too annoying. Because I know that there was a brand that is based solely in London. Well, is based in London, but they also do a number of local authority transport and other local authorities, cities globally. They had a little kind of minibus that ran around that you could book a seat on, and you had to walk to a specific place to go catch it?
It's the same as that. So we will have
It's the same model.
We'll have 3 zones and 2 buses per zone, and it's going to be 7 till 7, so much better than your 1 day a week shopper bus. But yeah, but we are actually taking out the local bus network for those villages, so they're going to go from normally rocking up at a bus stop and catching a bus to having to book and catch it from somewhere else. Maybe most of the time it's going to be from their nearest bus stop, but in villages that don't have bus stops, we're going to create what we call virtual stops. So yeah.
And those virtual stops, will they look very different from your custom stops? Because I now know, having done one of the first ones to watch is what is a bus stop, and it's me asking what is a bus stop and getting answers. Well, it's a patch of grass besides the road where if you wave your arm, the bus will stop for you. And I'm like, how would I ever know?
Yeah, similar to that, yeah.
Yes, I can imagine if you're spending a lot of your life in London, you have a very specific notion of what a bus stop is, and it's not until you get exposed to the world outside of our metropolitan elite bubble that you understand that a bus stop doesn't have a post and a shelter and a curb and all of those other things and a display. It may just be a pole or a patch of ground.
Yep. Obviously you were talking about electric buses in the Icebreaker, but we as a county are now on our 6th electric vehicle. So we have 2 running on a route that does actually connect the rural villages south of our river into the city centre. So we are actually using out in the rural community land, but we have installed charging infrastructure, and we've made sure it's got enough mileage to cover through the winter when they need to use the heaters, because it's all right running a bus round and we can get all these miles out of it, but as soon as you need to put the heaters on, that mileage drops.
Yes, I know that they've used hydrogen buses around the RV1 for ages inside London, and I think the new 63s are an electric double-decker bus with a clear glass roof. I've been on it once, and you can, if every passenger plugged in their chargers to the USB, I'm wondering what the top speed drops to, because they've got USB chargers on every seat, and I'm just looking at it going, what an attack. What an attack surface. You could just plug in a whole pile of USB chargers and just watch the bus slow down and stop. Not that I should suggest anyone does that, and I may need to delete this part of the recording. And Adrian is just looking horrified at my thinking. So let's just have a quick chat through these other stop statuses, because they are things that have popped up in part of this discussion. So under pending, and what I'll do is I'll just quickly change. I can't unlock it. I'll make sure that pending suspended are slightly different colors. So pending currently means pending delete. Would like to use to be pending use for new stops. I do not use, but if I did, it would be for new stops that will become live at some future point. Also a means of getting ahead with part of the work, though you have to remember to go back in and make it live. Currently don't use, but would like to, pending new stop awaiting to be built and installed, but have all the data prepared. Pending is a stop that has been uploaded to NaPTAN but is missing from the latest upload. Could be used for new stops, i.e. pending site survey install. Would like this to be due to open in the next X date range. We don't think it's on our system to use. Pending, so as far as I'm aware, pending's available in 2.1 but not in 2.4. I could be wrong there. Suspended, so let's just have a look at suspended. Temporary close stop, not found any journey planners but would like to, start, end date, time, etc. Cannot use, have little use for it. Temporarily suspended stop, useful for roadworks. I use this for long-term roadworks where the stop will be out of use for a period, but will return to use after roadworks completed. We don't think it's in our system. When a stop is closed due to roadworks or a major event, e.g. marathon, parade or tour of Britain. Would like this to be a temporary suspension of a stop that will come back into use. Same as deleted, use this for deleted stops. So there's a wide variety of thinking there, and I think we need to go away and have some really good thoughts on what some of this means and how we can make suspended work. Transferred. If a stop is temporarily closed and using a new one to divert journey planners without needing to remap all services in our systems, again, not found a journey planner that uses it, but would be great to have and save me a lot of work. Cannot use and have no use for it. Do not use. I would need to create new stops and manually move services. And manually move services from the old, even if eventually they go back again. My roadside information would not create properly for a transferred stop. Would like this to indicate a stop that has links to historic deleted archive stop. Don't think it's in our system. Transferred is used in TransExchange and not NaPTAN. Could somebody just help me out with what is used in TransExchange? But first I'll throw it to Mark.
Well, if you want someone to answer that point first, I'll come back to just a general overall of the suspended and transferred. Or I can.
I would like, just give me your thoughts, and then we'll go to what's in TransExchange.
Yeah, I'm not putting a point saying this is in the schema, but for what I've read, and to try and find, was there any use for it anywhere? Because I tried a few times of when we just had a stop that was going to be closed for 2 weeks. I tried suspending it, but then I was still finding journey planners using it. So I think the part of these was for end users as journey planners to use it rather than for pre-plans of your TransExchanges feeding out or to your systems, just as like a bit of an override. So you could override it in NaPTAN, and rather than having to remap, say, my road where I've got 20 bus services going down it, to take that one stop out of all them 20 services and then feed out to the journey planner. So it was kind of like a little override. So the stop would still be live for people to plan, like for bus operators to use it, but as the end users, the general public, their journey planner wouldn't journey plan from that stop at that time. And same for the transferred. If a bus operator was saying, "Oh well, I'm going down a different road, so I'm going to go past a different stop," the journey planner would, in theory, even though the stop was still in the TransExchange that's going to be closed, the journey planner would tell you to go to this other stop. That's the transferred. So again, it would be great if it worked, but it's not been really pushed out to end users.
It sounds like we've got some really good building blocks here. We just need to roll them out a little bit. And there's nothing worse than this bus is on diversion, and not knowing if you can hop off a bus at a stop or hop on a bus that's diverted. So obviously these have really good passenger impacts,
especially if we're going to go down
if
the
they
lines
were used.
If you're trying to push out, say, like a NaPTAN API, and that might get updated a bit more regularly, and journey planners can constantly update and look for some of these temporary closed stops and stuff like that, rather than us uploading our TransExchanges to journey planners, which some only update once a week.
Yeah, I think that's really great. Thanks, Mark. That's some really good thoughts. So just before we run to Andy, unless Andy's going to answer this question, what's the transferred is used in TransExchange and not NaPTAN comment? Can anyone help me understand this one?
It was me that put that up, Dr. J, anyway, but I just scanned through the TransExchange schema. I couldn't find the reference that I was trying to use. The problem with transferred, the way I remember it, is a stop. You can't transfer all passengers on one stop to another stop because several different services may use different stops. You cannot say one stop is definitely the transfer for a single stop. So I believe the transferred status is inside the TransExchange. So it is a stop by service is transferred to another stop, not by the ATCO code, but by the service and ATCO code.
I have transferred.
Does anyone?
But I can make a stop I think it's where I can make a stop inactive, and then I've got the option to make it temporary. I can't remember now, or maybe not the fully inactive. But I have there's an option around doing that to temporarily close a stop, and I've got the option to put in a replacement stop as the transferred stop.
Okay, I have been corrected.
but I
I'm
also
only
take
going on my
Andy's
personal experience rather than a whole generic thing. But yeah, I could be wrong. It could be somewhere else as well. But that's where I've got it.
And I also take Andy's point that it's not going to be every stop, every bus, every route that stops at that stop is not going to transfer to the same next stop, because even in the ones that I can think of, there would be slightly different stops because the buses living at Elephant and Castle, I can get to bus anywhere, but they go in spidery shapes.
I think it was just for if all services went from one stop to another, you could do it that way. But if you had to do it down to service level, that would probably have to be going down into your individual service trans exchanges or something like that.
So we are pretty much out of time. I would like people, I'd really, really like you to still continue to give us feedback. So right over on the right-hand side under number 7 is this whole feedback thing. So thinking about archived and deleted and the other conversations we've had today, can you put down what's given you joy? What has been really good and useful from this conversation? Can you let me know what's frustrated you, what's not good or useful, where we've gone down rabbit holes or the conversation hasn't been helpful at all, and what's made you sad? What are things that are missing or things that should have been happening that haven't been happening? And then up on the top right there, we've got all the contact details for everybody, for us on the team. So we've got the NaPTAN NubTig email address, Sarah L. Adley's email address, and Adrian Falconer's as well. So Sarah's the working from the data side on NaPTAN, and Adrian is working on the redevelopment of NaPTAN as a product owner. And thank you everyone for your time and for your attention and for your input today. It's been brilliant as always. Really, really good to know. Really good to meet all the new people as well. We've had so many new people. Hi Steve, hi Robin. Robin, hopefully it was as good as live as it is recorded.
It's no, it was fun. It's great fun. It's great fun. I've got to say, it's great fun to see it live. Yeah, much more interactive. You can't get me when I talk to you or anything when I on the record. It's good fun. Good fun. Yeah.
So I'm going to stop the recording when I can figure out where I've hidden the stop recording button.